And formatting on this, what we'd really like to do is, I want to provide a little bit of structure as it's related to setting up these boats. Because what occurs to me is I like to eliminate the variables and excuses. I like to know what other people are doing, and a lot of this has been gleaned over many years watching what other people are doing, the people who are faster than me at that particular time. I go look at their boat, I see how their mast is set up, I see how their weight is, I see how the thing's walking on the water line, and I make adjustments until the point where we're at least as fast as them. So what I want to share with you guys now is what we have discovered as a group over the past 15 years. 3 boats. It's kind of interesting because I was thinking about it the other day. I've won a Scudder Cup on 4 boats with 3 different helmsmen over the past 12 years. So there's been a lot of different boats and a lot of different, after the fire we had to get that sorted out. We had the 150 getting that wooden boat back together again, and then starting off again with this fiberglass boat that I think most of us are sailing now, except for the guys from Odin. So in any case, I found that there are some very specific. Hello, Tony. There's beer in the corner if you're interested in one.
Thank you.
What we want to do is we want to look at the variables, and we want to make sure that our boat is set up appropriately on these variables. So the first thing I do is I look at the slot in the iron chute. And the way I've come to a lot of this stuff is looking at the class rules. If you look at the class rules, what they're really doing is they're determining the characteristics of these boats. So if you look at the slot in the iron chute, the class rules provide for 1 3/8 inch width. If you're an owner of a boat, you should make a big effort to get your slot down to 1 3/8. I don't know if everybody will tell you this. A lot of people say it doesn't matter and it's expensive and this and that and the other thing. But the way that water moves up and down through there, if you're any wider than that, you have more drag than I do. Okay? That's going to be a disadvantage to you. It's legal to have it at 1 3/8. Bring it to 1 3/8, and if you want, you might even be able to straighten it out a little bit. The way I discovered this is back in the day, they used to clean these things at Crosby's so that the board would go up and down. The iron would develop rust, and I would close it. In order to get the board to go up and down, they would ream this thing out. So there was a time there where people were thinking, the more I can get that cleaned out, the better my board goes up and down, the faster I'm going to go. Well, I measured Don Law's boat, and it had basically a 2-inch hole from this side to this side. Now think about what that does to the way your board moves and how much water gets sucked up and down. It's a decided disadvantage, and I don't want to be walking around with that disadvantage. There's a couple of simple ways to deal with it. Crosby's is using a cold mold epoxy that they roll in there, and my buddy Lars Gook just takes little sheets of Luan or something and laminates them up there with 5200. Now you have a slot that you feel comfortable as 1 3/8. The next thing you do is you look at your centerboard in the wintertime. Bill has, we have a template established in the class that is provided to the builders and also anybody who's interested in looking at their board. Hi, Todd.
Hey, guys.
Todd, there's beer in the corner if you're interested.
Perfect.
There's a couple issues with these centerboards. The centerboard pin, the width of the board, and many of these boards, I hate to say, but I'm going to share this with you, show up warped. So if you haven't looked at your board and put a steel edge on it, which I do because I'm curious about those things, I noticed it was cupped. Many of the boards that come out of Bernie Shaw and some other builders have been cupped. So if you have a cupped board and a wide slot, you're smoked before you get off the dock. And it's not a big difference, but it's something that you want to pay attention to as an owner of your boat. The centerboard pin is another thing that's a big issue. Class rules also provide this. Augie Pesic and John Kiley have this exact information. But what you really want is you want your pin forward as far as it possibly can be and as low as it possibly can be. It can't be any lower than 6 inches because that's where the iron is, right? so you can't really drill a hole. And you can't be too far forward, otherwise your board won't go down. But the class designates a maximum forward, okay? Get on the maximum forward, because what it does, when combined with the centerboard pin location, is it gets your board forward with the maximum amount of board exposed. It gives you a good balance point for the rest of the setup, so you don't have as much weather helm, and you have more lift. Imagine if you're, what I'm talking about is this. Okay, so here's a pin location, and here's your board coming down there. Okay? If you move this back, and that pivot's there, look at what happens to your board. It only goes down that far, and the center of effort is further back. That's not good. So if you go forward and low, sort of in this spot, that gives you the maximum exposed board, and that's good. And it also, your CE, I'm not a whatever, but it moves your CE forward in line with where we're going to set up our mast. So that's a critical thing to look at. Those are the only things you have to worry about the bottom of your boat. It takes you, a tape measure and, 4 hours to have peace of mind for the rest of the season. When somebody sails by you, you're going to know that it's not your centerboard or your slot, and you don't have to worry about that. The other thing you need to eliminate is the issue of your mast step. The base of the mast is in the slot, in the mast step, forward, wedged all the way forward, okay, for this particular type of setup. So if your mast is wedged backwards, you're going to go faster and your boat's going to be more balanced if you move it to the forward location on the slot. Right? All the way forward.
No wedge in front?
No wedge in front.
So
okay.
The mast is going to actually be raked back.
Possibly. Ever so slight. What I'm trying to achieve is when I look at this mast position, first I'm going to talk about lead weight. And then I'm going to go, because what I want to do is I want to set the lead in the boat before I set my mast rake. Okay? And when we're talking about lead weight, we want to have the weight between the mast step and the trunk. That's it. Go wide rather than deep when you're setting that up so that it's in sort of one central spot. It's like the heaviest spot in the boat, right under the mast, and your weight is forward. And what it does, the reason you do this, guys, this is really critical. This, I think, is the most important thing that I know. The senior bow goes like this. And there's a really good example of it right there. That white half hull on the wall. When you increase waterline length, you increase theoretical speed able to be attained. If you push your weight forward on this bow and move your bow down by 2 inches, look at how much you've increased your theoretical speed potential. That's why you place your lead where you place it, and that's why you run 2 men in front of the bulkhead when you're going in, a wind under 12 knots, when it's not really windy.
Oh, just a question. Are you taking questions?
Yeah.
Okay. When you tilt it as you just proposed, doesn't the stern come more out of the water?
Oh, it kind of does. I'm so glad Augie and Holly walked in, because Augie actually is a person who brought this to my mind and who explained it to me. Augie, we're talking about weight forward, and I talked to Halsey Herreshoff about this. I saw him sailing bullseyes with my sister Mary over there, and I asked him, I was like, Halsey, with these curved bows, if you bring your bow down and increase your water line, does that increase your theoretical speed potential? Of course. And he says, yes, assuming you can keep your tail in. So what you need to do in order to keep your tail in is tilt your boat a little bit. In other words, heel it. I almost go down to the tow rail in any case. And what that does, it does 2 things. It maintains your water line, but it also reduces wetted surface. And those are the 2 key learnings that make the difference below I'm sailing a different boat than you, because I'm further forward and because I'm reducing wetted surface by sailing with a heel all the time, upwind and downwind. Upwind people achieve this by accident most of the time, so there's not much speed differential. Downwind, it makes a huge difference. And if you're wondering why somebody's going by you downwind, it's because, and it's written here, the key, the real key learning here is what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase waterline faster, reduce wetted surface faster. The way you do that is when it's not super wavy, and you can, like a light air day, just like this, right out there in the harbor, I would have my weight as far forward as I could. I would reduce my wetted heel by my wetted surface by heeling over to leeward, just almost toe rail in the water. And that's very fast, and I don't know if it's a secret or not, but I believe that that is a very important thing that I'm sharing with you guys. And the difficult thing, of course, is to educate your crew and execute that after every tack and every rounding. And who can execute that better and who can maintain that consistency is a person who's going to have a better theoretical speed potential over the course of the race. And not everybody can maintain these, it's very difficult when you come out of a tack, but you see a lot of people when they're tacking and they go around the bow. The reason for that is you keep your bow down through the tack. And in fact, you can roll this boat and you can stay in light air. You keep the bow guy, when he goes across, you keep him down to leeward. Now the bow's just sucked there. And the helmsman says, "Ooh, that feels good." And you don't know as a crew that you're doing something well until the helmsman tells you. But you can really feel it through the tack when you keep things forward by going around front, settling into that little spot right by the spreader, and then redistributing your weight. Now, if it's really windy, you're getting around to the other side, and the guy in front is getting his weight out first and fast and plopping it there. I mean, you just come down and sit as hard as you can, and then it just sort of roll tacks the boat. But if it's light air, you almost stay down to leeward. Let that boat settle low, and then get accelerating, and then you can redistribute your weight. But we really do. One warning we noticed last year, can't remember what day it was, but it was quite windy day, and I had three men in front of the backstay, and the boat was just pounding and taking on water. And it turns out that when it gets above, say, 12, 13, when the wind and the waves get bigger, you want to basically go to a neutral boat, not bowed down, because it's nice to have that big bow to keep the water from going everywhere. Everything's flat. And what you're doing is you're minimizing pitching. And minimizing pitching is a good thing. So just keep it, when it gets really crazy, big waves, maybe like tomorrow, I don't know. If it's flat, you can go forward. If it's really wavy, you've got to get neutral on it. And that, that's all it is on that. So we've got weight. Okay, mast partners are not always straight in these boats. So you can't say I'll take a same wedge on port side as the same wedge on starboard side and expect that to work. You've got to really set your boat, so your lead's in. Now the thing is sitting on the lines where we want. Essentially, when you look at this, you have like maybe 2 inches of rudder sticking out the back. And I would say that the top of the boot stripe in the bow is about where you want your water line. Neutral, sitting at the mooring, without crew weight. So you see rudder exposed up on top, 2.5 inches. On the front, I think it's right about at the top of the boot. That you have your first layer of water line, then they paint that white boot on top. And right at the top of that boot is essentially where our boat rests at the mooring. So with that setup on the bottom, now you're setting your mast straight up and down. So rather than raking back at that setup, it's really plumb at that point. But I think your comment was correct. So
number the wedges.
Well, the biggest pain in the ass every year is getting the damn well. It used to be getting the lead. And it is. I haven't got my wedges done for tomorrow yet, and it's been bugging me for so long. But the way to deal with this is you set your mast up. I do straight up and down. Some people, Augie, what do you do? Do you straight up and down now, pretty much?
In terms of 4.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much straight up and down, I think, is the modern thinking on this. So you get it set up straight up and down. You get it set up laterally so that it's going straight up and down. It takes a lot of eyeballing, a lot of looking up, looking around. Do you hang plumb lines, Alex?
No, it doesn't.
You just eyeball it.
Just get your eye. Yeah.
Just eyeball it. And then I think, what I do is I sort of get the forestay adjusted fore and aft. I sort of tighten up the backstays, not really tighten them up, but those sort of stabilize things and then crank on the sides. One thing that I think is rather important is the, I go with 30 on the lows. You're somewhere around there on the side stays?
I've quit using a gauge, but one comment is it's nice to take the boom out of the boom crutch because it's typically laid off to one side of the cockpit. So you center line.
That's a real secret.
The boom, so
it's balanced.
So it looks balanced, but your eye is the best tool you have with us right there.
Yeah, that's great. So that's not included in the notes, and I think it's very important.
Once you have the wedges set, number the wedges, mark the bow, and then mark which is port and which is starboard so that you don't end up putting the bow in the right place and going the wrong direction.
Yeah, Augie, I
So
believe,
it's
has
real
numbered
easy
and
to-
laced, right?
Yeah, we actually drilled a hole through each wedge and a nice long piece of string. There's something worse than being on deck and you drop one through.
You're so right.
Yes.
So just has a washer on either end and they all lay out.
It's a great program. So that, these wedges, as everybody around is talking about, is critical. Up and down, side to side. You just pretty much want to start that. One other thing I wrote in here is a rudder post. A lot of people have play in the rudder post. It's nice to be able to eliminate that, and a very simple way to do it is you just cut a hole in a piece of plastic, a plastic sheet, and that fits tightly around your rudder post. And then you can, sort of layer that in between a piece of wood and the does that work pretty good, Ox? Or
yeah.
Other methods?
Other methods, I mean, if you're going out and you just want to try, you want to get the slop out of the tiller. If you take like a cable tie and cut the tail off and just jam it down the hole between the rudder post and the sleeve itself, it'll just eat up space and take the rattle out. You know what I mean? Just And it's nylon, it'll consume itself over time, but you just get rid of it.
Yes.
Wow, wicked secret.
And if anybody wants to know, the angle of the rudder post is 20 degrees. So when you drill the hole, it's 20
Get your hole cutter and cut through
at a 20 degree.
We've got Teflon.
Teflon bearings.
And that really does work well.
Yes, it
And it's a
does.
simple, elegant, and not very expensive
Odin's got it now,
solution.
so, yeah.
Okay, so the other issue that I don't know, that I haven't seen too much of this, and I read this in a book that was published in 1930 when they were using wood mass everywhere. And it's really related to the spreader angle and the shroud angle. And the idea is that you're supposed to have an equal, this is an equal angle here and here. And you have to tip your spreaders up a little bit to achieve that. And I call it a perky spreader, and I really like to sail with a perky spreader because I think it's fast. If I look at somebody that don't have a perky spreader, I'm not even worried about them. I don't care what anything else is. It's just my thing. I believe this is also really cool and really critical. If you sail with a flat spreader, I figure I'm going to sail by you, so I really don't care about that.
It's going to fail.
It's going to fail.
It's going to slide down.
Yeah, it does slide down, and that's what happens. So, and the mast will fall down if the spreaders fail. Tucker, do you have the rest of that thing I want to get into? I think that covers the basic boat in terms of setup, and I just wonder if anybody has any questions or would like to make a comment or would like to contribute something to the boat setup aspect of things.
I went down to Crosby and asked them actually about my centerboard, having it filled. And they told me there was a class rule and they couldn't do anything with it. They told me that 2 years ago. Augie, I think you were checking with them at the same time.
Oh, yeah, no, it's there's been a whole...
It's perfectly fine to get the curse out of your centerboard, I think. We were talking earlier about this, sometimes they cut hogs.
No, I'm talking about the actual slot. I was going to have them fill the slot. I'd read in another magazine.
1 3/8 is a number.
It can't be narrower than 1 3/8.
So how do I,
So that might be that size. I mean, that's why they suggested not changing it.
Measure it yourself.
Okay.
Or just confirm it with them.
Yeah, it's a pretty sticky it's a really important measurement. And what can happen is you can fill all the way up to the top of the iron chute. So you've got 6 inches at 1 3/8, and that really does bear on the board a little bit. And one of the problems I've noticed with these boats is that the board does bang around, and it's really irritating. And one good thing is to make sure your board is as wide as it can possibly be. I think it's 1 1/8, and that your slot is as narrow as it can possibly be. I think that's 1 3/8. Go ahead, Austin.
Well, I was just gonna say, I thought you could only modify the slot if there was wastage. You couldn't just do it on a new boat manually, but that was my interpretation of the rule.
I think that's what the rule says.
Yeah, it can be repaired back to 1 3/8.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I guess it's how you interpret that, and I'm not sure there's anyone who's got.
Does anybody have a brand new boat here that just dropped in the water? I would say, I'm not an interpreter of the rule.
Yeah, that's what the rule says. If there's wastage, and it's, I guess if this board goes up once and down once, there is some wastage.
Well, the wastage that we're talking about is we talked about the iron keel and the way it interfaces with the salt. And then you that closes up. And then you scrape that down at the end of every year, and that relieves some of the iron away from the inside of that slot. And Alex, before you got here, I said I noticed Don Law's boat back in the day was almost a 2-inch hole in there from that, back in the day when they used to just ream that thing out to get the boards to go up and down, particularly in old wooden boats. And I think that's a disadvantage to someone who has that, and something that I've shared with the group.
Yeah, just a little, well, this has no bearing on this discussion, but we've discovered that coal tar epoxy, which is like basically what they put on steel bulkheads down in marinas.
What are we talking about?
Is the best coating that goes in your slot. It will stop it from rusting.
Stops it from rusting. And I think, have they developed a way to lay this thing on its side?
Just, you gotta roll it in there.
They just roll it in there.
Like a 1-inch
and it
nap roller.
sets. And it's got to be one of the most worthwhile. When I was first sailing with Frank Saul on Yankee Dive 145, that was Harry Bridges' old boat. Basically, the first thing we did was replace the rudder, because he had a wooden rudder with a horrible shape, and we filled that hole in the slot. The other thing is kind of interesting is these check valves on the scupper holes. I don't know if you have check valves on your scupper holes, but if you don't have check valves on your scupper holes, you probably should have. It's a little flap on the bottom that doesn't allow the water to go up and down. And any water that goes up and down in these scupper holes or in these holes in the slot is slow. If you don't have check valves, I'm going by you. And it's just something that, Augie, do you have check valves on your boat?
Well, the little Edson.
Yeah, the little.
Balls in the cartridge drains.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anything else on that boat setup thing? Because, that's really, slot, pin location, centerboard. Make sure all those things are sorted out into the class minimum specs. Then you've got mast step forward. You've got mast partners all different, mast straight up and down, lead placed in the appropriate spot. Okay, and instead of going fore aft with the Augie, I'm thinking between the mast and the trunk, and out rather than fore and back in terms of stacking. It's the way I do it. There may be a different.
Just so it doesn't move around.
You don't want it to move around.
Jam it in there.
Okay.
What I discovered is like an old carpeting pad, like that kind of woven foam stuff in there, keeps it from sliding around.
It's about 6 foot. There's about a 6-foot area between the mast and the front of the centerboard trunk.
I don't think so. I think it's pretty small.
It's small, but
Yeah, like 3 foot.
the whole 600 pounds up there.
Yeah. That's what I don't know what other people do. I'm just sharing what I do, and I think it's fast.
The more concentrated you make it, the less of a pendulum you make out of the boat.
Yeah.
And it's also pretty close to the mast and the centerboard, which are 2 big parts of weight.
Though the further out that you go, the less riding angle you have down at the keel, right? So are you balancing that at all, or no?
I don't know. I'm just trying to eliminate that pitching. And if it gets really light, and I'm trying to increase my water line, I've got to send a crew member down there to hug that mast. Hopefully they're good and hungover. No, but they do that in jail.
Tony does that on our.
So Tucker, I don't know if Tucker's still there. Do you have it page 2? Because I want to go into this whole sales situation. The sales situation that I want to talk about, and I read this Tom Whidden a long time ago, who's a good sailor, is he talks about the sail plan as being all together. what you're trying to do is accelerate the flow off the back, on the back of this main. Thank you, Tucker. What have we got? Okay, so we've got the trim the hull, crew weight, angle of heel, sail trim. Okay, trim both sails together. Upwind, the goal is to accelerate the flow along the back of the main. So what that leads me to believe is don't over trim the jib. A lot of people are talking about this Venturi effect and how it, how it accelerates flow through the slot. That's totally wrong. Okay, you get a circular flow around your jib, a circular flow around your main. They accelerate each other, and that goes around your entire boat. It creates an upwash effect in the front, which allows you to point. Okay, your main gives your jib a header, I believe. Is that right, Augie? Yeah. Is it a header or a lift?
Your jib gives your main.
Your jib gives your main a header?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which is why you trim your main in tight and keep your jib loose. Okay? If somebody says we've got a point, trim the main, ease the jib. But how can we point if we ease a jib? If you trim your jib, you're going to stall and you're not going to be able to point. So trim your main, and I don't want to say ease your jib, but what I do on both sails is I look at the telltale on the leech. There's a leech telltale that's at the top batten, essentially, in between the first and second batten on the jib and the first and second batten on the main. And we yell and work at every moment to keep flow on both of those. And we can flow them pretty tight, okay? And we do that by bringing the jib car back a little bit and by dropping the peak a little bit. Both of those things loosen up the leech on both sails and keep our flow. So the way I laid it out here, once the jib car is set so that your luff telltales break evenly, and I don't mind if the top breaks a bit first. If the bottom breaks first, move the car back. And it's an easy way to remember it. I read it somewhere, bottom back. Okay? So always, once you get that set up, essentially you want your jib telltales breaking evenly. And you get that to happen by moving your car forward and back. If you can get your top one to break a little bit early, that gives you a little bit of twist, and that's good. There may be some situations where you don't want as much twist on one tack as you do on another. And some people get so advanced, and Bordy Lloyd tells me he'll have a different car on each tack. I never went that far. But, if you're into it, okay, so keep that flow at all times. Trim that jib in until the flow stalls, and it is just, as we all know, a 1/4 inch, right? I mean, you trim that jib in a 1/4 inch too much, and that thing just goes, it goes, wee, and then, and what you really need to do is you need to keep that thing flowing. Right, Mary? Okay. Now, this is sort of interesting, and Richard Feeney brought to us a couple of years ago. Set the main up at the gooseneck. We put a pin in through the mast track. That pin keeps the gooseneck from going down. What used to happen is we trim in our main so much that it would pull the gooseneck down. It would tighten up the main downhaul, which would move the draft forward and kick the leech and all that other stuff. So what Richard brought to our boat was essentially a solid placement for the gooseneck. We adjust our downhaul really by cranking up the halyard, the throat halyard. And that's what gives us our luff tension on the main. I don't know why, but it seems like it works really well, because what it doesn't do is, I recommend installing, do you guys have a 6-to-1 on your main? Do you have that little double wrap on off the trunk? I think that is, besides the weight, I think that's a really critical thing. Because what it does is it pulls your boom down and in. If I can sail 1 degree higher at the same speed, I'm gaining, it's like 100 feet a mile. Considering how many miles it takes to sail 1.2 miles upwind, that's a lot of feet. If I can get 1 degree, I think I'm getting 2 or 3 degrees on a lot of you guys. And I do that by cranking my boom in really tight with a 6-to-1. It's really a 3 or 4-to-1. It goes, I don't know where my damn
block we never used.
Yeah, so it starts out back here, then it comes up and around, goes up here, comes up, and then 1, 2, 3. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a 6 to 1, and what this does here on your boom, there's your gooseneck, is you get this tremendous bend in your boom. And what I think is really good about this tremendous bend, in sail trim what you're trying to do is you're trying to increase lift and reduce drag. Well, anybody can increase lift by pulling the main in and pulling the tiller toward you. But what you're doing there, and you can feel it, is you're developing an awful lot of drag in both what's happening on your leaches and what's happening on your rudder. So what sail trim is, to me, is how do I increase lift and reduce drag? And what bending this boom does is it gives you this frisbee effect in your main. You know how a frisbee is sort of flat in the middle and it's curved on the sides? Well, that's really surprisingly high lift, low drag. How far can you throw a frisbee? And what I believe happens to a senior sail when you bend your boom like this, and you can only bend it with like with this. I mean, you can do it the other way. Some people put a whole bunch of ratios back here, and that pulls the damn tail of their boom down, I think. But if you have a 3 to 1 here, that pulls everything right to the trunk, gives you bend, and I think you get a frisbee on that. And I think that frisbee's helpful. And we work really hard to get that to happen, to get that bend to happen in the boom. And we get that to happen in a way that does not restrict the flow off the leash by dropping a little bit the peak. And now, instead of being up, a lot of people are up like this, we go, whoop. So boom is straight, little bend, peak is down a little bit more. Sometimes you can even see a little crease that runs from here to here. And it's almost like you're sailing 2 different sails, right? You've got this part of the sail, which is sort of twisted off depending upon whether you want a lot of point or whether you're in big waves or something like that. And you have this bottom part that is essentially frisbeed right in here, and that's wicked tight. And I put actually some telltales that go along here, and I see beautiful flow, and here's my little perky little flower right there. And, you know, to me that's a really good setup, is tight on the bottom, and then drop the peak off a little bit so you maintain your flow. The thing is, you cannot get there right away after attack. You have to build speed first. And the way to develop lift in these boats is you flow the thing so your underwater appendages give you lift. You have 3 degrees of weather helm. That's the opposite of a sail. So now it's like this, now it's like this, that's lifting you that way. So this weather helm at 3 degrees actually lifts you. So you tune that up. If 5 degrees is too much drag. But at 3 degrees of weather helm and the boat moving fast is actually giving you lift. It's not your sail's actually pulling you the wrong way, right? And it's the resistance of the hull going forward that's lifting you up. So the important thing for lift is to go fast. Once you have full acceleration, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 10 seconds after attack, and you start rolling, then you can crank that thing in the last little bit without, because you can't get there. You can't get to 4th gear from 1st. It just dies. What you really have to do is build this thing up after attack. So you just come out of attack. There's no frisbee. It's loose, flat boom. Everybody's out on the rail, jib set, main's coming in, we're flowing. Somebody feels it in their pants. Okay, we've got some good speed. Now we can crank it in a little bit more. Don't mess with the jib, just a little bit on the main. And that's how you get up to full point. It's not 1 step, it's 3 steps. It's tack, flat boom, build speed. As the speed comes on, now you can bring it up a little bit, and you get this really nice balance. So you can get up there wicked high, right? Like you can't even believe there's sparks coming off this freaking Traveler. And you're like, you tack, and your Traveler's stuck. It won't come over unless you release the jib. I mean, unless you release the main. That's how tight it is. And you're still flowing at full speed, where you're pointing like 3 degrees higher than anybody else. Your bow's down, your ass is up. It's like, what the hell is that guy sailing? It's a totally different boat. Totally different. And that's
Yeah, well, I don't want to interrupt your
No.
moment here, but I just want to point out that the curve and the boom, you can't underestimate how important that is, just the way the sail is cut. And one thing that I see all the time is the forward block on the boom itself should be directly over the block on the centerboard trunk. A lot of times they're aft.
That's right.
Boatyard doesn't care where they put them.
No, Augie, you're exactly right. And that's what, you know what is important about, because that allows this thing to flow up. You're exactly right.
Well, and it makes it easier for the crew to get through the cockpit. Instead of compressing the gooseneck, you're actually pulling the middle of the boom down, and you get a nice curve.
And curve is key.
Joey, going back to Boardy Lloyd years ago, 20 years ago, whenever, they used to use boom vangs. And what you've done is reinvent the boom vang without using a boom vang. Yeah. And that's exactly what you've done, and it works. But Jack Fallon didn't like the boom thing.
I think it's a Frisbee thing. I really do.
Yeah. Same thing, exactly the same thing. If they stopped using the boom bangs, it was pulling the ribs out of the boat was the problem. That was with the wooden bangs, you know.
Well, in this case, snapping the boom. Okay, so make a star on that because that's important. Where are we? Okay, so I want to talk conceptually. What you're doing is maintaining flow off leaches, both of them. Building speed and trimming over time. High lift, low drag, Frisbee shape. That's concept, and I think it's important to understand this whole idea of sail trim concept, because every day is a different day. There's a perfect trim for every condition, and the condition is constantly changing. So what you need to understand is conceptually, what are we trying to do? We're trying to flow our leaches, we're trying to reduce our angle of attack, right? And we're trying to move the boat through the water, because moving the boat through the water is what gives you lift. It's not the sail that gives you lift, it's moving the boat through the water. Okay, so that's conceptual. Keep wind free flowing around entire sail plan, make sure both leaches are flowing most of the time. Properly trimmed jib accelerates flow on the back of the main, which increases lift. Okay. Sailing downwind, when I was sailing with Holly, I had this thing, I read Buddy Melgis's book, Sailing Smart, thought I was a freaking genius. And this whole concept was downwind, ventilate these sails, right? Because Buddy says if you're sailing dead downwind, and the only thing that's happening is the wind is blocking your sails, you're just sailing. If you can ventilate, in other words, if you can get your telltales to start moving, either forward or back, you're accelerating that flow, and you are going faster through the water because of it. And there's one, okay, so this whole idea of ventilating sails is, all right. So with the spinnaker 2, you can also ventilate. You get your spinnaker, and what I do right under the number is I put this little telltale. There's one on each side. If they're hanging like that, you're not ventilating. If you ease your sheet, you get one of these or the other to point in any direction, and now you're even ventilating your spinnaker. The reason I know that's fast is because I was sailing into Halifax with Ricky and Lonnie Burns, and they had one of those on their boat, and I was playing the spinnaker, and I looked at the speedo when the thing started dancing, and it was shocking how much faster. It was over a knot faster with that thing dancing. So I would recommend putting a telltale on your spinnaker and making sure that you ease that thing out so that you can get at least one of those telltales to flow off horizontally. Oh my gosh, it's Stuart Roach in the house, coming up right now. This is outstanding. Okay, so I say side stay tension at 30. Some people agree, some people disagree. George Largay, in my opinion, was one of the fastest guys I've ever seen out there. That 202, Tim Wadlow and George, and I couldn't figure out what they were doing. So I had to go before Hyannis one day and see what their side stay tension was, and I put a gauge on it. The damn thing was 32. Guess what? We put our side stay up to 32, and now we're keeping up with George. So I think that's an important number. I don't know really why, but I think it's important, and there's a simple gauge for that. So in order to sail well, now we're talking a little bit about sailing. And I don't want to talk about tactics. What I want to do is go into another session on that and sort of wrap this thing up. But it's really important as a group on your boat to think about shifting gears. And what happens when you sail into a hole? Or what happens when a puff comes? Or what happens when you see a puff coming and you anticipate? And if you think about Edgartown, you know, and these things rolling down, these puffs rolling down Cow Bay, and if you can stay connected to that puff through awareness and working up a little bit, somebody who's not connected just all of a sudden goes away. And you lose boats and boats, and many of us have been lost, and many of us have gained. And you know, you're like, whoa, what have they done? They just stayed connected to that ship. And it's being aware of what's going on and adapting yourself and your boat to those conditions. Richard, stay up in this puff because these guys down below are falling off. That is really good information for a helmsman to have. And it's a really good way to all work together to get your boat set up so that you're doing that. What do? Trim a little bit, peak up a little bit if you have to. Don't bring in the jib because it's going to kill you. So, okay, so here we go. 0 to 4, you want flat sails, 1 crew forward, and to leeward below, 2 people forward of the bulkhead. 5 to 9, build shape into your sails, 1 person forward and below, 2 people forward of the bulkhead. 9 to 12, full power, still keep 2 people forward of the bulkhead. I'd say 12 plus, start to reduce shape to depower, 1 person forward of the bulkhead. That'd be your jib trimmer, your foredeck guy. Everybody else will be behind at that point. 0 to 10, this was another key learning from Carl and Heather Gregg's brother. No backstay upwind under 10 to 12 knots. Kind of interesting, huh? It really makes a difference. I don't know, I think what it does is it keeps maybe your jib a little bit fuller. I don't know if you guys go with this. Holly and I have done it sometime. I don't know what your thoughts are there, Oggs, but we found that, you know, 0 to 10, I just tape my damn backstay, and I don't use it until I go downwind. And so, light and lumpy, you know, all of a sudden you sail into a hole and the wind goes away, and there's a lot of waves left over from that big wind, okay? It's just a simple thing. First you recognize, light and lumpy. Crikey, we got to get out of this thing. Ease, add shape, and twist. Twist is what happens, you know, you just ease your main or drop your peak to develop twist. Okay, weight, tight, together, really important. You don't want somebody sitting in the front of the boat, somebody back. It's like all those little Indians. We all want to be huddled together, all the way together. Everybody, you know, just, it's really important, particularly when the boat's pitching, because it minimizes all that stuff. So those are the things, light and lumpy. Recognize it, ease your stuff into it, and then keep your weight nice and tight and neutral. Big wind and big waves like it's blowing 20. Flat sail, downhaul, outhaul the whole way, and a lot of twist. I didn't realize what this twist does, but when your boat is going up, the twist in your sail is pushing the mast forward and over the sail. When your bow is going down, that depowers. So this twist reduces pitching. If you do a twist and trim, now you're just rocketing through these waves and you look like a genius, and it's just the way your sail is set up. So that is a really critical thing. Key theory upwind, maintain leach flow, trim boom in tight, drop peak to maintain flow, outhaul and downhaul are key and sensitive controls. Both affect depth and location of draft in the sail below the through. You know, there was a lot of people that sail around. I was talking to Penn about this, Penn Edmonds. You know, I don't know if it's because of Carl or whatever. We all sail with these little scallops on the base of our main, right? Some people would say that that's really reducing the surface that you have to work with. So what you should do, I think, and what I'm going to try to do a little bit of, is maybe not carry so many scallops on my boom, and see how that works out. You know, setting the peak outhaul, it's got to be neutral. I think it's better to be slightly tight because of that whole idea of shape up at the top kind of weirds me out. I think it's better too tight than too loose. And I think, you know, but you know, if anybody, I wish somebody else would take the floor. If anybody has anything to contribute, well, let's have a discussion about it because I'm about out.
Just, I might have missed it, but what about crew placement when you're on a spinnaker run?
Oh, excellent. Okay. Downwind, super critical. Weight forward, weather heel. You have to, it's the same thing, and it's much harder to do downwind. It's an accident when it happens upwind. But downwind, you have to be extremely conscious of it. It's 4 people on the windward rail. It is a full exposure now of your of your spinnaker. Here's your forestay looking forward. You can't even really see it, but you're seeing that entire spinnaker on this side of your forestay. This thing is by the lee, and the boat is tilted like this. Okay? That's what it is. And it's rocket. Absolute rocket. You can't maintain it all the time, but if you can find the puff and locate yourself and lock in that position, you're reducing wetted surface, you're increasing water line, you're fully exposing your spinnaker, and you're ventilating your sails. All super fast. So yeah, that's a good question.
When we got it, the spinnaker flying higher, we were doing better.
Anything else? Yeah.
How would you sail how did you sail 145 and 150 differently than smoke?
Well,
and I apologize that this doesn't apply to everyone.
No. That's, it's funny because in a wooden boat, it's harder to tighten things down because you start taking on water, right? So the first thing is we have 4 pumps. And I really, that changed my life because I was the guy that used to have the pump. So putting those pumps in with the batteries, and then you have it looks like a weird thing. It's like Spider-Man and a Doc Ock or something, but it really is helpful. So that was one thing that was a lot different. The other thing,
Yeah, you can't set your shroud tension at 32.
You can't set your shroud tension at 32. But you can still do everything else okay.
Right, exactly.
And, it's really only the shroud tension.
That's right. I mean, 60% of the Scudder Cup is sailed in under 12 anyway, so, or I think it's like 4 out of, didn't Don, what percentage of the Scudder Cup is sailed in under 12 knots? It's well over.
It's way higher than you think.
Yeah, but and also I just want to say, when I crewed for Don for years, we would adjust the boat, get the stays all set, go sailing, and when we come in at the end of the day,
yes,
we'd loosen everything.
Right.
That's what Penny would. That's what we would have to do.
Yeah. You loosen. I loosen the side stays after every race. After we've done our sail.
Yeah.
So the boats. So actually, I got that from Joey.
It's pumps, it's side stays, but everything else. I think a wooden boat could actually be faster. And
right, if everyone else stays in.
And 145 was significantly faster.
145 was a bloody fast boat, and 150 was stored on its keel. So that was a pig because it sat down, and what it had was a hollow ass. It was a modern miracle we won with that boat, but there were a couple of shortened races, and we were sailing with Kevin Kane, who's a brilliant sailor, and that was an amazing series. We won that damn thing. But I don't think there's that much disparity in speed. I think that our wooden boat 145 was faster than 188. I thought when they were both on the race course together, and because I think it's really about length and width. I think you could have a narrower wooden boat and maybe slightly longer too. And I think these fiberglass boats were an average of the 6 best. They weren't the best. And I think there was a little bit of variation built into every one of those boats. And I know 145 was a bloody freaking fast boat. I don't know about the others, but I think there's a difference between the boats. Anything? Stu? Great to see you, bud.
Oh, sorry, I'm like.
You got your crew ready for tomorrow?
Hopefully, we'll see what happens. Actually, maybe I will ask you a question. If you have any tips for the peak outhaul, if you set it up for light air, suddenly the breeze comes on, is there anything you can do in terms of either, cranking the peak up higher to tighten that?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that does affect your peak outhaul tension is your downhaul tension. That pivots on right?
I think my question is,
you're saying
you've got
is there
5
a way
minutes to the
compensate?
start, oh my God, it looks like the peak's too tight or too loose. What do you do?
Drop the freaking peak and retie it.
And retie.
Yeah.
Don't go the day like hoping it's all right.
No, it makes a big difference.
Right.
It's weird. It's kind of a critical adjustment that you don't have to change all the time. You just need to get it sort of right. I think set it and forget it, right? I don't think we changed it once all last year.
Yeah, just years ago, Alan McDonough said, 4 fingers, tie it off. And I talked to Carl once about that very subject. He goes, I said it when I put the sail on, and then I never touched it all season.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he was slinging it truth
No,
or not.
no, I think he is. I mean, we at one time had a little track with numbers, and we'd look, and Gordon would be like, I think it should be at a 5, and Alden would say, I think it should be at a 4, and we would almost come to blows over this, just going out, just for the hell of it. And we'd get it set. But I think the important thing is you don't want that wrinkle up on top, right? You don't want it stretched so that you see that wrinkle. But maybe, and the way I said it, Stu, is I look here. When you get this angle of the peak, you have that little, whatever it is, shackle or string or whatever you tie. I get that to point essentially toward the end of my boom. And that, if this is too tight, this is going to point up. If it's too loose, it's going to point down.
Right.
So to the extent you get the shackle pointing right there, I think that's a pretty good way to get equal luff tension on both. And I think you probably do want to keep about the same luff tension on both. If it's blowing 25, I'd probably crank the peak a bit. I remember Carl came on our boat. Remember that day? And he just cranked it. Oh, okay. Yep. Set it and forget it. All right. Anybody want a beer? Or any other questions, or anybody? Yeah.
If there's a Xerox machine in the office, that'd be great if we could get some more copies.
Yeah, I think we're going to send.
You can have this one, and
we're going to send this out.
Tim's going to electronically send out the whole thing.
Thank you.
I'm excited to go sailing tomorrow. It's going to be good. The good news is I get to drive this year, so you don't have to worry.
Whoa.
All right. I hope your insurance is paid up.